Hello people, today Dead by Daylight released one of their biggest updates to the game ever. And in this video, I'm going to break down the 5 most important changes that have been made and discuss why they matter to us as players. If you want to see all of the changes, the patch notes are in the description, but let's get into it. Number 1. UI changes. The controversial user interface changes have been released on all platforms despite widespread criticism. The new UI moves important elements, such as number of generators remaining and survivor health states, from the bottom left-hand corner, and it's kind of spread it around the perimeter of the screen. The change also adds survivor portraits to the screen so that players can track the status of specific characters, not just their name. That information is super useful if you're not playing in a survive with friends and you're in solo queue. Another change is a hook counter, and that's been long awaited, and it's super useful for survivors so they can see how many hooks each player has left and plan their strategy accordingly. Killers can see how many hooks they have in total, but not how many for each survivor, and this is designed to reduce tunneling according to the devs. Usually, I try to reserve my judgment on new features until I get used to them. I can definitely see why a lot of people dislike this change. Dead by Daylight is a game where a single lapse in concentration can mean you miss something important on the screen, such as a survivor hiding or a killer stalking you. Because of this, obstructing multiple locations on screen instead of just bottom corners seems like it's going to be pretty distracting at first. One good thing about it is that Behavior have added the ability to change the size of the UI. So whether or not you like it or not, you can reduce it, which is great for people like me because I prefer an immersive experience without the clutter. But a lot of players would prefer it if, like on the mobile game, you were able to customize where certain icons go so that you had complete control over the size and location of your heads-up display, which I think is a good idea, but apparently it's kind of complicated to do, so we'll see what happens. Number 2. Survivor animations. This is another unpopular change. Dead by Daylight have added new animations and poses for survivors. The default standing pose is probably the most noticeable, which has moved from like a nervous on-edge pose to a confident, powerful stance, which some players are saying doesn't really fit into how the game should feel. You feel like more confident, but you should feel scared. You're a survivor with a killer chasing after you. They've also added some transitions between animation states, such as from standing to running, standing to turning, and even teabagging animations. Despite the developers saying that these changes have no effect on gameplay, players on the PTB noted that playing felt a little bit different, and I noticed it myself. Survivors kind of felt a bit less agile than before the update. The developers did release a post which admitted that although on paper, nothing related to the speed or movement of the animations has changed, a player's perception of the character's position on screen may differ, which is why it might feel a little bit sluggish in comparison to the old animations. It's probably just a case of getting used to it with this, but I can understand the negativity around this change because essentially what they've done is just screwed with our muscle memory. It's kind of like if you switch the keys around on a keyboard like a little bit. There's no difference to how the keyboard works on paper, but it's super annoying to have to rebuild the muscle memory you've developed over years of experience. In any case, we'll have to see how the players respond over time before any further changes are made. Number 3. The Clown rework. As one of the least played killers and sitting at the bottom of many tier lists, the Clown definitely needed some love. Behavior have made a few changes that they hope will improve the Clown's overall performance and popularity. First change is a really simple one. The Clown now reloads his bottles a lot quicker than he used to. This means you can reload in 3 seconds rather than 5. This is a 2-second difference, which doesn't sound like much, but in a game, it can be the difference between throwing away a decent chase and keeping a decent chase. The second change is a bit more drastic. The Clown now has 2 different bottles. One is his usual Afterpiece tonic, which slows survivor movement speed, but now he has a second bottle, the Afterpiece Antidote. And this activates a few seconds after being thrown and gives any player who encounters it a boost to movement speed. This can be used in 2 ways really. You can use it to give yourself a speed boost, or you can use it to encourage survivors to go in a certain direction. It adds some new mind game elements into the Clown's playstyle. And although it seems a little bit odd for a killer to buff a survivor, let's not forget that he can gain the speed boost too. They have also added a couple of interesting add-ons. The one that kind of stands out to me is one that switches the colors of the tonics, making for some pretty fun moments. In general though, survivors are pretty smart, and if they run into a color and get a certain effect, they're going to communicate to their teammates via survive with friends or by pointing or something like that. So I can't see this add-on being meta. It's just a little bit of fun. Apparently the next killer for Rework is the Demogorgon, so hopefully we see something that stops him being seen as the cute little puppy of the game and turns into something a bit more deadly. Number 4, perk changes. There are a few perk changes in this update, and I'm not going to cover them all, but the most important is definitely the change to Hex Undying. I can practically hear all the survivor mains crying with joy that this is finally getting nerfed. I mean, let's be honest, Ruin Undying was a pretty horrific build to go against. The changes to this perk mean that whenever the first Hex totem is cleansed, it becomes Hex Undying, which is then broken and deactivated. So, essentially, the first perk cleansed is never your other Hex perk. Tokens also now transfer to the relocated totem, And that basically means that combinations with Devour Hope and the third seal are actually viable with Hex Undying, and probably pretty strong, to be honest. Another change to this perk is that you can only see survivor auras when they're cleansing dull totems, instead of being able to see them when they're cleansing any totem. This means that Thrill of the Hunt now is more useful than it used to be, but it doesn't completely kill the Ruin Undying meta. You still get some value from this combination, but it does mean that you will never get to a stage where survivors need to break 4 totems to get rid of a Hex perk, which was honestly pretty silly. Other notable perk changes include a buff to Iron Maiden, doubling the time survivors are exposed from 15 seconds to 30 seconds, as well as a diversion buff where you get your purple more often, meaning more opportunities to distract the killer. Number 5, map reworks. Everybody loves a graphical update, and in this patch we get 2 realms. The game map needed some work to make it seem more atmospheric and to resemble the horrifying sets made for the Saw movies. There are new elements in many rooms, and the map just seems a lot more like a complete jigsaw kill room, rather than feeling like you're just running around an abandoned warehouse with some boxes in it. Since the PTB, Behavior listened to player feedback and brightened the lighting in the game map, and it seemed a lot darker than it needed to be initially. It's super bright now, so I can see them maybe putting it back to the middle ground, because it does seem really bright, which is great for killers but bad for survivors. But in general, it looks great. Asylum maps have also received a complete graphics overhaul, improving the textures and lighting and changing some map elements to switch up the feel of the gameplay. Now, I can't totally say this is a positive thing though. I know that a lot of players have frame rate issues as it stands, let alone on reworked maps. I can imagine it's incredibly frustrating to buy a game where you do meet the minimum specs, so you put the money in, and then they make the game more graphically intensive over time. So it gets worse. I can't see that being a very good experience. But for me, I really like how they look, and I hope that the optimization issues are addressed over time so that everybody's happy with them. With all that being said, I'd love to know your thoughts on all these changes in the comments, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.
Fuck it, I'm the bad guy, the bad guy. You're dead to me, you're flatline, you're flatline. Listen, it's the last time, the last time. I'm hurting, but I'll act fine, I'll act fine. You're tricking other people into thinking it's me. You're portraying an image that you don't even believe.